Welcome back, everyone. This is the Revenue Governor. I am April, your host, and we are going to continue our control series. We are in Signal 4, Coaching Without Deal Inspection. It's so funny, right? Because coaching, it's one of the most emphasized responsibilities in sales leadership. Every organization talks about it. Every manager, they are expected to do it. And most teams believe they're actually doing it well. If you look closely, though, seriously, most coaching doesn't actually change anything. Deals are not improving. Patterns, they are not breaking. Results, they do not shift. And the reason is because most coaching is not anchored to reality. Remember, your reality, it's different from mine. There is an illusion. Managers are active. One-on-ones, they're happening. Call reviews, they're scheduled. Feedback is being given. Reps, they're hearing some guidance. So leadership sees coaching activity. The system feels like it's improving. But coaching activity is not the same as coaching impact. And most organizations, they never separate the two. I have Dimitri joining me, and I am so excited about this because Dimitri wrote the pre-sales navigation system, and he works directly inside complex deals. So when we talk through coaching, this is coming from what actually happens within deals. It's not just what should happen. This is what actually is happening. Dimitri, would you like to say a few words?
Stop serving the deal. Start serving the decision. And the reason I'm excited to talk to you today, April, is because in our previous conversation, we always keep seeing that the same problem from different sides.
Right.
So you see it from the revenue governance side, and I see it from the inside the deal. And the gap between those two is exactly where the revenue dies. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be interested to hear it from these both sides of both sides of the same story.
No, I actually agree. I'm super excited. So let's go ahead and dive in. I have two questions first up front. When you hear coaching that's happening on a team, what tells you immediately that it's not tied to real deals? That's question one. And then what are the phrases or patterns that signal to you that it's kind of surface level?
Honestly, most of the time, not a rep problem. It's deal that was never real and nobody said it out loud.
Right.
The rep looks like a problem because they're the one holding it when it stalls. But if you go back far enough, and I've done this a lot, the failure happened way earlier. Somebody decided that was a good opportunity and the whole team just built on top of that without ever checking it. I've seen SCs spend 6 weeks on deals where nobody had ever talked to a decision maker. The AE was confident, the relationship felt warm, but the whole thing was fiction. And not because rep messed up, because nobody ever stopped and asked, is this actually real? But when you do fix that, everything flips. The hard conversation happened early instead of late.
Yeah.
The team stops carrying dead weight, and win rates go up.
Yeah.
Not because you're closing more, but because the bad ones are gone. It's not about what the rep did wrong. It's about what was true about this deal that nobody wanted to say.
No, yes. You know what? And what I love about what you said is the rep is actually holding the deal when it stalls. Because if they had a manager that was holding them accountable and appropriately inspecting these deals, well, that wouldn't happen, would it? They wouldn't be holding the ball when it stalls. Let's go ahead and expose the gap. It's simple. Coaching is not tied to real deals, is it? As I think about this, it's pretty clear. Managers, they're given advice, but the advice is based on general patterns, maybe some past experience. But the only issue with that is once you're in leadership, you have years before you actually are on the front lines dealing with these customers and these clients, working through these deals appropriately. So your managerial experience is usually based on what usually worked, what worked in the past for you, instead of what actually happened in this deal, what decision was made, what signal was missed. And that's so important. There essentially is no inspection of the deal itself, no breakdown of the decision points, no validation of execution. So coaching, it just becomes more abstract. And abstract coaching, that doesn't change the outcomes, does it? Let's just see what this looks like in practice. You're going to hear things like you need to ask better questions. You should control the conversation more. You need stronger next steps. And all of those, they sound right, but none of them are anchored on a specific moment. No one is saying, in this deal, you missed the decision maker here. In this deal, you accepted interest instead of confirming urgency. This is where the deal actually stalled. Without that level of specificity, reps, they can't connect feedback to behavior, so nothing actually changed. And you know what? This is something that I get a lot of props for in my leadership experience with my teams. It's always, April, you are so honest about what's happening in the deal. April, I love the fact that you called this out. And it's those moments where things actually change live in that deal, and it's tied to actual behavior. I'm not just giving feedback on what could have happened, what should have happened, any of that. It's tied to specific behavior. And so things change. Dimitri, second question, man. When you look at a deal that didn't move, what do you actually inspect? That's one. What moments matter that most managers actually miss in your experience?
Urgency every time. And the thing is, teams really believe they have it. The customer's engaged, the calls feels good, the SE says, oh, they're really motivated.
Right.
That feels like urgency, but it's not.
Right.
Urgency is when something breaks if they wait. A real person with real consequence, not preference, not excitement, a cost.
Right.
Here is the easiest way to test it. Ask your SE to describe the urgency in the customer words, not yours, theirs. What did the customer actually say that proves waiting hurts? Most of the time, the SEs can't answer that because the customer never said it.
Right.
They like the solution. They were interested, but nobody ever asked the hard question.
Yeah.
What happens if this doesn't approve, if this doesn't get approved this year, and who takes the hit? If the answer is nothing really breaks, that's not a deal. That's a conversation, and you can't close the conversation. Enthusiasm fills pipeline, urgency closes deals, and most teams can't tell the difference until it's too late.
Urgency is so important because urgency actually satisfies a solution. Without urgency, you can't really move a deal forward. So where does it break? This is where coaching, it kind of comes and becomes repetitive. Managers, they start giving the same advice across the deals. Reps hear the same feedback every week, but the issue doesn't go away because the real root problem was never diagnosed. Advice replaced inspection. And once that happens, coaching just becomes routine. It's not corrective anymore. Manager failure. Let's talk about that for a second. Managers, they rely on pattern recognition. I've actually had so many leaders say to me, I'm going to look for the patterns within these calls. So they assume the issue and they coach based on assumption instead of asking, what actually happened in this deal, or what changed? What evidence do we have? I know why, though. It's because real inspection, it's going to slow things down. So most coaching, it just stays at the surface and the system learns. Again, we talked about the system learning. Feedback doesn't require proof. All right, Dimitri, you are up. Question 3. This is more of our coaching breakdown. When do you see coaching go wrong most often? Is it from a lack of skill, or is it more of like no one actually grounded the conversation in the deal itself?
Nobody looked at the deal.
Right.
That's it. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
So the managers coaching, the SE is executing, everyone's busy. But the actual deal, that thing that's seen in CRM, nobody looked at it honestly in 3 weeks. And I've been in that room so many times. You ask SE what's going on. They tell you the story. You give advice. Mm-hmm. They nod, and you feel like you coached. They feel like they got coached, and the deal still dies.
Oh man, the deal still dies. That is such a point, right? Let's just go a little bit further here and let's diagnose the actual layer. If you want to see this signal clearly, look at your coaching. Ask yourself, is feedback tied to a specific deal moment? Are decisions broken down step by step? Do reps leave knowing exactly what changes next time? Or does coaching even sound the same across deals? If it sounds the same, my friend, it is not coaching, it's commentary. Let's just pause for a second because one of my leaders actually, Chad, once told me, treat your reps like your clients. Literally, you treat them as you would treat a client. You ask qualifying questions, direct qualifying questions, look for concise answers, and force them to be honest with you with real reality. Such good advice, such good advice. All right, guys, moving on. Let's look at system impact. Once coaching is disconnected from deal inspection, the same mistakes, guess what? They repeat. deal quality does not improve, so pipeline behavior stays the same. Forecast risks, they remain hidden because nothing is actually being corrected. There is a cultural consequence. Over time, reps begin to adapt. They listen, they agree, but they do not change their behavior because the coaching isn't actionable. So coaching becomes performative. It's so strange how that happens, right? No, remember, you are teaching the system, you're teaching your reps. What's driving the revenue and the outcomes at that point? All right, Dimitri, you're up. Fourth question. This is the pre-sales exposure. From your perspective, how often are pre-sales team pulled into deals that are not actually qualified? That's one. What are the early signs that you look for that tell you that this deal is not even real?
Oh, all the time. And it gets worse when the pipeline is thin,
Right.
which is exactly when you can least afford it. When revenue under pressure, the bar for what counts as a real deal actually drops.
Right,
And
I agree.
I've seen it many times. The SE get pulled in the conversation when there is no real problem defined, no decision maker, no urgency.
Right.
And then because SE wants to help, that's how we are wired. We show up. We build stuff. We invest time, and we do it to keep the peace with sales. So we end up absorbing the cost of bad qualification, and it never shows up anywhere. The signals I teach the SC to watch for is when the champion can't explain this to the VP in their own words. Nobody defined what's done looks like. You ask a hard question, and the customer looks surprised, like nobody's ever asked them that before. When I see that, I stop everything. Discovery before anything. Discovery before demo. Every time. That's not negotiable for me. And the teams that actually hold that standards, where the SC can say, we are not ready for this yet,
right.
Without turning it into a political thing, those teams close more, not less. They just close different deals. They're the ones that were actually real.
I mean, honestly, dude, that takes a lot of courage, doesn't it? You have to have courage to come to a meeting empty-handed and explain why. You have to understand your pipeline to be able to do such a thing. And no one really wants to go to their meeting with their manager, letting their leader know, hey, I don't have anything coming in. So let's talk about what real coaching looks like. It's much, much slower. It's specific, it's more uncomfortable, and it focuses on one deal, one moment, one decision at a time. So essentially, what happened, what should have happened, and what changes next time. And it ties directly to deal progression. Operators don't coach behavior in isolation. They coach decisions inside deals. Like me, I coach live. I am on the front lines with you, understanding exactly what's going on in your pipeline, coaching you live while you were in a demo or on a live call. I inspect what was said, what was missed, what changed. And I tie that directly to the outcome because coaching is not advice. It is correction. Let's shift gears just a little bit. Here's what I want you to do. In your next coaching session, I want you to do one thing differently. Ask your rep. Walk me through the last decision in this deal. Then go step by step. Where did it change? Where did it stall? What should have happened differently? That's where the coaching becomes real. All right, Dimitri, let's keep moving. What most teams call a deal is usually just activity, right? A conversation that happened, someone showed some sort of interest, maybe it's a follow-up call that was scheduled. Dude, that is not a deal. A deal, it's defined by movement and decision. So before we can even talk about coaching, we need to understand what's actually real. Dimitri, next question. What does a real deal look like to you? What specific signals or behaviors make you confident that a deal is actually progressing?
Oh, a real deal has a friction, and that's the thing nobody talks about. When every call goes great, nobody pushes back, everyone loves the demo.
Right.
That actually makes me nervous because real buying decisions create tension inside the customer's org. Somebody has to justify the cost. Somebody has to own it if it goes wrong. If you don't see any of that tension, they're not buying. They're just evaluating,
right, commenting,
perhaps indefinitely.
Yeah.
But what I actually look for has the customer, a buyer who has the economic buyer on the customer side done something that cost something, not just showed up on a call, actually committed, push the VP timelines or sign the NDA they didn't have to, or ask the question that proved they actually read the proposal. And the real urgency comes from their calendars, not ours. If the only reason to close by the quarter end is because it is our quarter end, that's not the urgency. That's our problem dressed up as theirs. And that's why I cover the full signal set in my book, because it comes up in literally every deal I've ever looked at.
Right.
The signals are always there.
Yeah.
It's just whether anybody was looking at it.
No, right. And because of those signals that are being present, there's nothing to actually coach, right? You're not improving execution. You're maintaining noise. And it gets really noisy in sales, doesn't it? All right, guys. I mean, honestly, most teams, they try to fix this, but it's at the surface. There's more coaching, there are more call reviews, more feedback is given. But if the system itself isn't structured correctly, none of that is actually going to hold. So the question becomes, where do you actually intervene? Dimitri, if a team wanted to correct this issue, what would they need to change first? Manager behavior, deal inspection process, qualification standards? Where would you actually focus?
Deal inspection.
Okay.
Deal inspection.
Yeah.
Not a new framework, not a new methodology.
Agreed,
just
man.
the actual practice, looking at deals together and asking questions before the forecast conversation.
Yeah.
The most teams do have a pipeline reviews. They might call it inspections, but they don't have an inspection. A pipeline review are about stage and coverage, and next step. Inspection is about truth.
Right.
What do we actually know? What are we guessing? And what happens if the champion leaves tomorrow, for example? That sounds like a small change, but it's really not, because now you're asking people to say out loud what they don't know in a room where not knowing has always felt like a weakness.
Right.
So that's a culture shift, and you don't get a culture shift from a Slack message.
Right. I mean, that's so true, right? And here's the other thing, because this is really where most organizations get stuck. They try to improve coaching without actually fixing the system that coaching sits inside of. And that is why it never holds. There's always something most leaders won't say directly, right, Dimitri? But it's happening. Managers are avoiding something, not because they don't care, because it's uncomfortable. And we've talked about this many times before, but who really wants to be uncomfortable? Pressure makes a lot of people fall short. All right, moving on. Dimitri, if you had to say this plainly, what are most managers avoiding when they coach without actually inspecting the deal?
The avoiding the moment when the deal gets smaller, because if you really inspect it, you might find out it's a Q3 clause, not Q2, or the champion doesn't have actually the authority that everyone assumed, or the competitive position is weaker than it is in a CRM. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. And now you have to do something about it, which means a conversation nobody wants to have mid-quarter.
Right.
So instead, managers coach behavior is like be more assertive, follow up more.
Right.
Stuff that sounds helpful, but doesn't really actually require looking at the deal. So and if it closes even badly, nobody asks whether the coaching had anything to do with the reality, because the system almost rewards avoidance.
You heard him, guys. The system, right? The system teaches. And what did he say? It rewards. Now, the thing about it is avoidance is what allows the system to keep drifting. It drifts and drifts and drifts because what's not being inspected? It doesn't get corrected, right? This becomes even more visible when pre-sales gets involved, because pre-sales operates closer to the deal reality. And that's usually where the gaps start surfacing. All right, but you know what? This becomes more visible when pre-sales gets involved, doesn't it, Dimitri? Because pre-sales, you guys operate closer to deal reality, and that's usually where the gaps start surfacing. So here's my next question for you. Where do you see the most friction between sales and pre-sales when a deal is not fully understood?
Well, it often breaks at the demo request, but the real problem started before that. The second a deal enters the pipeline without pre-sales being part of the qualification conversation, the SE is already behind. So a story is being set, the assumptions are baked in, and when the SE finally get pulled in, their job is basically to support that story, not question it. So when can you run the demo on Thursday shows up, the SE is being asked to perform without knowing what the customer actually confirmed, what the environment looks like, what success even means to them. And a good SEs feel this right away. They know a generic demo won't move this deal, but pushing back creates a problem with the AE, so they decide not to. So and this is the part that is invisible on your April side.
Right.
So you can create a clean forecast, great pipeline hygiene, a disciplined cadence, and still lose deals in a technical evaluation because the pre-sale side was running on assumptions nobody ever challenged. So the fix isn't better handoff process. It's agreeing on what ready to evaluate or ready to do X actually means before the deal starts, not in the middle of a deadline pressure.
No, right. And that friction, right, it's not the problem. It's the actual signal. It's the moment where reality starts pushing back on assumption. This also shows up in how teams spend time, because once deals are misdiagnosed, time gets allotted incorrectly. Think about it. Reps, they stay engaged in deals that aren't moving. Managers keep reviewing deals that aren't even real. And the stage stays busy. All right, Dimitri, you're up. What is the clearest signal that a team is spending time on deals that should have been disqualified way earlier?
Oh, yeah. The late stage surprises that everyone treats like a bad luck.
Right.
A new stakeholder shows up in a week 8, or a technical requirement surfaces that should have been obvious on a call 1, or budget appears out of nowhere or disappears.
Right.
And the team acts like nobody could have seen this coming, and they could have. The information was always there, and nobody went looking because looking might have slowed things down. I actually have a test I run when I walk into a team. It takes about 60 seconds per SE, and within 5 minutes overall, I can tell whether the team is working the deal or actually understanding them. Those are really different things. Working a deal is an activity, and understanding it is knowing where it's fragile. And
Agreed.
Most teams have a lot of the first and not much of the second.
Right. And this is actually where efficiency begins to crumble quietly, where nobody really understands anything. It's not because people aren't working. It's because they're working on the wrong things. Dimitri, if you step into a system code, you don't start with coaching, do you? You start with reality, because coaching only works in systems where grounded and being grounded is true. If you were stepping into a team tomorrow, Dimitri, what is the first thing you would look at to determine whether their deals are actually real?
Well, I skip the top of the pipeline completely and go straight to the middle.
Love
because the best deals always look fine, and the dead ones are obvious. And the middle is where you really see how the team thinks.
Right.
The deals that are real enough to keep, but nobody's quite sure what to do next. So I ask SE one question on those deals, same question every time. And within about 3 answers, I can tell you exactly where the inspection is breaking down. In general, and specifically on that deal within that SE that week. But what I'm really finding out is whether the SEs know what they actually believe versus what they're been putting in the CRM. And most teams have never asked if those two things are separate. But once somebody does, everything shifts.
Agreed.
But you have to know what to listen for.
Yes, Dimitri, we are on the same page. That is the starting point. It's not the activity. It's not the pipeline size. It's the deal truth. And you find that in the middle.
Yeah, the scariest part about this, that it hides, because, well, some deals close anyway. Good market, strong champion, a competitor drops the ball. Stuff works out sometime. And when it does, the system gets the credit. So the forecast looks clean. The coaching looks like it worked. Nobody connects the misses to the inspection that didn't happen 2 months ago.
Exactly.
When you don't see what it is costing underneath, is the SE who burns out running on the junk deals and leaves. The customer who bought something that wasn't right and doesn't renew or return the product.
We hate
the manager who works harder every quarter and can't figure out why it keeps getting harder. So, and the fix isn't complicated. Just somebody just has to be willing to look at the deal and say what's actually true. Build that into how your team runs, and everything else follows. The forecasts get cleaner, the coaching gets sharper, the SE starts owning deals instead of just working them.
Agreed.
But every week that doesn't happen is a week of drift, and the drift left alone looks exactly like a revenue problem.
Crumbling. Dimitri, this has been an absolute honor. In the end, coaching without inspection doesn't build performance. It maintains it, because if feedback isn't tied to a real deal, nothing will change. Revenue control signal 4. Coaching without deal inspection. Until next time.